we need to find a way of captivating the people that ordinarily wouldn't want to be involved. And so I just think there needs to be a bit more thought.
If they don't want to be involved?
If they don't want to be involved, it's often because they don't have time to be involved.
But if they haven't got time to be involved?
So that's what I'm saying, that
therein
lies the point.
Because if I'm a developer, I'm doing too much just to try and captivate someone that hasn't got time to do it.
It boils down to what is your reason and purpose. If your reason and purpose as a developer is I'm trying to make the most buck for my, then this conversation is like this, you stopped before you've even begun.
This is the Property Development Book Club podcast. Please be advised that the views expressed are of the individuals and do not represent their employers and should not be taken as advice. Please do your own research and seek advice from an appointed professional.
Hello everyone, and my name is Letato Marema, and today I'm your host for the Property Development Book Club podcast. Today we're discussing Black community and Black professionals' contribution to regeneration. And we've got a powerhouse of a panel today, and I'll just get them to introduce themselves, starting with Karen Daye.
Hello, well thanks for inviting me. My name's Karen Daye. I'm an urban planner. I've been a chartered town planner for 20 plus years. I worked across policy, DM, currently specialising in planning appeals.
Amazing. And obviously your connection to the BAME
yes,
network as well.
I am a steering group member of the BAME Planners Network. I'm also co-chair of our TPI London and have recently been elected to the General Assembly of the Royal Town Planning Institute. So quite a few hats on today.
Amazing, definitely. Amos?
I'm Amos. I head up a network called BPIC Network, which is all about inclusion across construction, the built environment, and I also run a small M&A company called Nuance Services.
And an avid runner as well.
Yes, yeah. Started running, yeah.
Amazing. And Selasi?
Yeah, hi, I'm Selasi Setufe. I am an architect. Currently Principal Project Officer at the GLA and also one of the co-directors of an organisation called Black Females in Architecture.
Amazing. And as well, from learning from your Instagram, an avid lover of all things furniture and art as well. So again, thank you so much for being here today. And to kick off the discussion, really putting to everybody on the panel today is your sort of thoughts around Black communities and our contribution to regeneration in the UK so far. Anybody want to have a go? Selasi, let's start with you.
Our contribution to regeneration so far, I mean, historically, I think Black people have been very much involved in terms of workforces that have contributed to building of London as a city as we know it. So we could speak about that. I think Black people also been pivotal in when it comes to housing. I know that there's historically quite a few black housing associations that were established sort of I think around the 70s and 80s that have been quite impactful and shaped certain communities. And I think today it's a little different. I think we don't necessarily tend to have a collective voice in what that looks like for our communities. But yeah, through organisations like Black Females in Architecture or BPIC and Paradigm and others, I think at least the professionals within the space are starting to galvanise and trying to make sure that we have a voice and an input in how we develop our communities going forward.
Amazing, and obviously we'll talk a little bit more about that in later on. But any other thoughts from your perspective, Karen?
I mean, I think part of the reason that the BAME Planners Network has come together, the aims of the network, if you like, are to really raise the profile of Black planners within the industry and to encourage more Black people into the industry and support their elevation to fulfil their potential. And I think it's quite important that when we're planning for people of colour, that we have those people embedded within the profession. So I think certainly that the network and organisations of that kind are pivotal to how we are a part of the regeneration planning process and involved.
Absolutely. And I guess it's that balance between, as you say, having a seat at the table, influencing how things are done, but also as consumers, as community members, as, people who live in the neighborhoods and are actually, living and breathing what regeneration actually feels like. So it's almost that two-sided approach, really, to think about how we can continue our voice and expand on that.
Yeah, and I think it's about how we communicate, because I know from my point of view that friends and family, if they get sort of a letter through the door that there's been some regeneration scheme, they just sort of send it to me and say, well, Karen, what's this about? Yeah. Because you go online and there are hundreds of documents. So for me, it's about the developer and what they do, how they encourage and entice people to be a part of the process in the way that is user-friendly. So yeah.
Amazing. And Amos, your thoughts?
In regards to the contribution of people, I think there's a lot, in terms of black people in particular. They've contributed as part of society. I think some of it goes without at times being recognised, but like as you were saying earlier on, I definitely think there could be a bit more engagement, which is a bit more structured and a little bit more simpler when it comes to up-and-coming developments, especially around here. There's a lot going on, but this just across London. But in terms of the profession itself, there is a lot that goes on, and a lot of professionals that are doing. I mean, in London is a prime example, because you've got a big population of black people, basically. So when it comes to the work that's being done, people that are making decisions, it's quite a lot actually within the sector. So I think it's there is a lot of contribution there that could be recognised, but that recognition should go towards, I guess, more educating more people to come in and what the industry is good at.
Yeah, completely. And I think when we think about our collective contribution as a community, it's also thinking about where we're starting from, the angle in terms of having to push for better standards in terms of housing, having to push for better standards in terms of community amenities, and the community leaders sort of driving that discussion, and in a way driving regeneration as well through that. You've seen that in various parts of the country. Brixton is one example. Peckham, Leeds and Toxteth are all areas that you get quite a sort of historical African and Caribbean communities who in the beginning were really, kind of stood up for themselves and said, we want change, we want communities that work for us as well. And having a voice in that context to say, actually, we need better. And then through that, you start to see elements of regeneration plans coming together, councils, coming forward to identify, where improvements can be made. So there's, lots of information and sort of research around that kind of stuff. But it's just wanted to sort of touch on that as an initial question. So just segueing into that, I'm going to come on to Selasi for a two-part question. And it's really sort of based around community involvement and how you foresee, our community taking a more active role in influencing regeneration, thinking about, where we've come from in the past and, the present day. Your thoughts on that?
I think there's a lot to be learnt from the past. Like I was saying, making reference to like housing associations and how they're organised and how they operate. But also a lot more, I feel like there's a need for us to feel and assume more agency and find ways to be empowered, to not wait for other people to just do things for us and help define what's done. And I think a more community-led approach in how we approach housing is definitely needed. community-led housing is a whole different bag of thing in and of itself, which we could delve into. But to touch on it very, very lightly, I think there's something to be said about emergent practices in community-led housing where people are galvanizing around a particular need and saying, okay, I have a community of people, of young people, for instance. Take Barking as an example. I'm from Barking, I grew up here, I've seen it change. I've worked here, I've seen it change. I know that there's loads of people, young people, who still live at home, not by choice, but because of financial circumstances. It's not as easy to buy, for instance. What would happen if a group of 10, 15 people who are in their early 30s wanting to buy but can't afford to buy came together and say, okay, you know what, let's try and find a piece of land to buy. Let's try and get into some kind of development agreement with some people, and let's try and develop housing that meets our needs. Okay, maybe there's some of us who have children, maybe there's some of us who have children with additional needs. How do we meet the needs of our community in that, and how do we, move the needle forward in terms of what is on offer in terms of housing? And this, for me, is what I think we need to start doing and thinking about, a more community-led approach that is well suited for our needs, that doesn't rely on whatever developer is doing or whatever the council sees best to fix its housing needs. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, you touch on a number of, interesting points, and I think this really segues quite nicely into the stuff that Amos has been doing with BPIC, and really thinking about what we can do as a community, as professionals. There's so much experience on this couch already. How do we galvanize together to start to come up with plans, start to come up with funding models that actually enable those things to happen? But on a basic level is informing the community of how do you start to have these conversations about, oh, actually, I can come up with an idea of what my local community centre might look like, or there's a piece of land that the council has for, a certain amount, and there's opportunity in there. It's making sure that people at all levels actually understand that those opportunities are there and how to access those opportunities. And I think ourselves as professionals could, have a massive role to play as part of that. How do we start to influence the process in a way that is more impactful, in a way that actually gives us more agency? And rather than saying, okay, we can continuously have to, attack the system as it currently stands, it's looking at, okay, what else can be done in a way that's not been done before, in a way where you're actually galvanizing experience, expertise within the profession and within the community to look at opportunities, as opposed to relying on sort of influencing the system from within. Is that?
I mean, you need to do all of it. I think there's too much time spent trying to do just the one thing. And my point here is you need to do all of it. We need to look back to look forward. How are people doing it before? Take the good bits of what was working, innovate it, and make it into something new that works for us. How do we penetrate and infiltrate the system? How do we make sure that question? You were saying you live in South
East London, yeah.
How engaged are you in your local community when it comes to, if they're sending out an SPD, for example, are you responding to it? Are you commenting on it in the same way as being involved in where you work, for instance? I know that the typical built environment professional does not do that.
Yeah, I can admit to that.
Wherever you live in South East, if they send a consultation, are you getting involved? Likely not.
Well, I think that's down to the way you're asking people to get involved. Last year I was at the South Bank, where Spike Lee was being recognised for his contribution to film, and they put together a compilation of his films, and I was so captivated by how they put that together. There were loads of films that I hadn't even heard of, and I came away from that thinking, why couldn't a developer be charged with putting together, not in the sort of rose-tinted glasses kind of way, but put together something that captivates people to be able to consume a regeneration project in a way that works for them.
But why would they do that?
Well, if they want buy-in, if they want people to be engaged, if they want some sort of social value to come from what they're proposing, then they need to find that's why I have people calling me saying, well, Karen, there's like 100 documents. I don't know what's going on. Can you explain it to me? They need to break that down. They need to explain it so people can think, oh, okay.
So you're saying the local government should tell them to do that?
Well,
Or should it be the local government that breaks it down?
No, it shouldn't be the local government. I think it should be the developer. It should be part of the validation of an application. There should be something that engages with all. We're not engaging in the same way we used to, so we need to raise the bar.
Yeah. The reason I'm asking is, I just don't want to sound like we're just anti. No. Like we're just saying all them people.
It's not anti at all. It's obviously as a part of major applications, you will have to have some community engagement. But I'm just thinking we need to find a way of captivating the people that ordinarily wouldn't want to be involved.
Yeah.
And so I just think there needs to be a bit more thought.
If they don't want to be involved?
If they don't want to be involved, it's often because they don't have time to be involved. If you go on and look at an application, there are hundreds of documents.
But if they haven't got time to be involved, they haven't got the time. Because if I'm a developer, I'm doing too much just to try and captivate someone that hasn't got time to do it.
What is your reason and purpose? If your reason and purpose as a developer is, I'm trying to make the most buck for my, I don't care really who's going to live here. I don't care the quality of what it is that they're going to be living in. I don't care about social value. Then this conversation is like you stopped before you've even begun. But where we're trying to get to be able to create the kinds of communities that we need, where our children, our grandchildren are going to thrive and succeed, be healthy, not succumb to things like air pollution, tackle climate change, all of these things that are happening in and around us, then everybody's going to need a level of care. Government is going to need a level of care. The private sector is going to need a level of care. The public sector is going to need a level of care. And we as the consumers are all going to need a level of care. So the onus is going to be on everybody. It's not going to be on just developers in the private sector or the government and the public sector. It's going to be on everybody. And what we need to get closer to is how do we get to the nitty-gritty of what is social value and how do we make sure that everybody is plugging into this thing to the benefit of everybody. It shouldn't feel like, oh, private developers are the ones who are burdened by everything. And ultimately, we don't even have a circumstance where we can say that we're anti-development because we all need housing. We're short, there's a housing crisis. We need more housing, point blank period. So it's not a conversation of anti-development. It's how are we doing the development? How are we bringing our communities along with us? How are we ensuring that Black and global majority people of colour, our voices are being heard in that conversation. Our needs are being met in that conversation, and we're not just being pushed out to the fringes more and more.
The reason I was saying that is because any developer needs to make money. Otherwise, you're just not going to last.
Yeah, it's got to be viable.
It's got to be viable and it's got to be making a profit of some sort because the developer gets paid last year, so everything else happens, the build this, and then after that, they just count what's left. And then if they've made money or not, it is what it is. So their driver is to make the money. Yeah, the people that really should be setting the scene or the tone is the local government or the local government. They're the ones that should be really prescriptive on what they want, and they're not.
It's obviously you will have due regard to the policy background around which you're making a decision, but what also feeds into that is the community. So it's not a case of, because there are prescriptive policies that are set out, but planning is very much about balance and weighing up the various competing issues that come to bear. So it's not a case of having a tick box of, well, that's tick, tick, tick. Things weigh in the balance. So, for example, there may be harms that arise from a development, but they're balanced by the fact that, well, this is going to add to our housing supply, or there's a significant proportion of affordable housing. So planning is very much about a balance. So while you do have the policies, you have to weigh them in the balance with harms and benefits. So, and also get that buy-in from the community.
At a very early stage.
Yes, because planning is also It's about structure, spaces, so on. But behind that sits those invisible structures. It's very political, economic, financial.
There's a couple of things that come out of that in terms of how do we as a community are more involved, because statistics do show actually minority Black communities aren't necessarily as engaged in the planning system as you would like, and yet there are areas that are being affected by planning regeneration proposals. So it's understanding how do we arm the community with the right level of skills and understanding of how to influence what happens in the areas at the very early stages, and you don't get scenarios where communities feel like things are being done to them as opposed to, you know, bringing along in the journey. So there's a number of things as part of that, but I'm gonna move on to your question actually, Amos, which is around equity, and I think it sort of leads into this focus on social value, and the question is really about how regeneration projects and putting your BPIC hat on can be designed to ensure the long-term social and economic benefits of Black and minority communities.
If you really want to make it benefit the locals, you do obviously things that benefit the locals. So what you tend to find out is in Barking here, where we are, I'm not from Barking, but I've seen it, like, traditionally from Leytonstone, that's where I grew up. So I've seen the area change a lot with new developments. But the question is how many, for example, local businesses, small businesses, are actually part of the building process? Yeah, are actually building, because you get a local builder from here that's going to be part of construction projects, and they're spending their money locally. You know, they're going to, I don't know, bars, clubs, wherever. They're buying from the local shops. They're doing all that sort of stuff. That's an easy way to create wealth locally.
We've both touched on social value, but when it comes to the NPPF, the National Planning Policy Framework, you will not find the word social value in there. I don't think the word social value is in the London plan, and I don't think there are any social value policies. Do you know what I mean? So it's at the moment, it can be aligned with a nice to do and not a need to do. Do you get what I mean? So I think from a policy point of view, this idea of social value should also be embedded at the national policy stage. Because the thing is, I said in my day-to-day role, I deal with planning appeals, inquiries, hearings. So what the developer has to do is to essentially mitigate against harm. Social value arguably is one step beyond that. So I think it also has to come down to policy and compliance with policy, and social value has to be a golden thread that runs through corporate, local policy, local plan policy, regional and national policy to be able to get the social value from these big ticket regeneration schemes.
I think...
I didn't finish answering my question.
Sorry, I didn't it.
Go on.
So the second bit was to do with just the local employment, I guess. I mean, that's it. There's a lot more to it, but I feel like the leadership of that could be obtained locally when it comes to just making sure that regeneration is essentially leveling up communities. Yeah, there you go. Sorry.
I think it's a tough thing to be from a place and see it change around you. So I'll use myself as an example. Like I said, we're in Barking currently filming this. I'm from Barking. I was born in Barking. I grew up in Barking. I live in Barking. I've worked in Barking.
Barking 360.
I understand all of the aspects of what you're saying, and this is the reason why I asked the question before of wherever you live locally, how involved are you in that? Because in the same way that you're not involved in that, that is in the same way that impact that you're seeking to benefit the local builder or whoever is the same way it's not, that's the same reason why it's not happening. How involved is that local builder
in what?
In the politics of the place? Yeah. If you know what I mean. Yeah. How involved is he in joining a committee that is going to give him or her the platform to be able to make known what needs to be done in order that when procurement is happening, they get a look in. That's not being done. That's fine. because
I think
it's not happening
I think
across
it
the
is,
board.
by the way. Yeah.
I've seen it not happen, and I've tried to make it happen. So I'm talking from my lived experience.
They were never involved.
So what you would find is that in situations where people have that care enough and are concerned with social value enough, trying to put in systems where that can happen is now an uphill battle, because nobody's used to that sort of more socially led social value aspect of things. Now, there's a list of the kinds of organizations and builders and within any given area, right? If you're doing 1,000, 3,000 plus homes in an area of regeneration, for instance, my knowledge of Berkeley and Dagenham is that there isn't a company, a large scale enough company that's going to be delivering, if you're talking about contractors, they're going to be delivering that. Most of them are SMEs.
Yeah, which is 99%. So
that's
you're
fine.
probably asking 3,000.
That's fine. But is the council, let's not talk about the private sector, but is the council delivering on that small scale? From the time that I spent within Be First, which isn't the council, by the way.
Well, it's a Congo, isn't it, for the council?
It's not the council. But from the time from the time that I spent there, none of the projects that we were doing were of that scale. But where there was opportunity, for instance, I managed the small sites program.
Okay.
And I spent time trying to find ways to do some of these things that you're talking about. So you can go and ask, and the legacy would continue. I've now left, right? So let's see how that pans out.
Yeah.
How we're trying to make inroads into making sure that local people or SMEs and other people have a look in. Efforts are being made. So, and that is because of wanting to push the agenda on social values.
So I think there's, a number of things and a number of aspects where, we have to start to ensure the long-term economic benefit for communities. And I think procurement is such an important route for us to do that. Not a lot has been done at the moment, but it's making a start to ensure that, SMEs, diverse DPS systems are embedded, within councils as part of developers, and really getting them to change the culture of how we buy, how we, trust local SMEs to deliver on major projects. The other thing that I wanted to highlight is where you have long-term projects, 10, 15 years in terms of delivery, which is one of the projects I'm working on. It's being embedded within the community, and throughout that process, setting up opportunities for local people, employment opportunities, upskilling, really just looking at the fabric of the community and how you can provide opportunities for leveling up, not just on a sort of business level, but on an individual level, to see what what you can provide for that community to grow over the period of that project. So coming on to the last and final question to Karen, and putting your planning hat on again, is around how you consider there to be opportunities, and I think this circles back to the first question, opportunities for greater involvement and understanding by Black communities and minority communities in influencing the planning process. What do you think needs to be done going forward?
So that's a big question. Firstly, what the BAME Planners Network is trying to do, so we're trying to raise the profile of Black professionals, Black planning professionals. We're trying to encourage more Black people into the planning profession, and we're trying to uplift, and as I said, through sort of networking and interview practice and mentoring. So I think it's important that we have those people of colour that are affected to be embedded in part of the profession. So that would be my number one. The second is a recognition of the fact that planning is extremely powerful. It affects where we live, who we live next to, our access to opportunity, our access to housing, our access to healthy food, our access to good schools. So it's a very powerful tool. That's the first thing to recognise. What we need to do is understand how our communities can engage in that. And it's to touch on some of the things that I mentioned before. It's about how we make engagement with the community more accessible, more enticing. But it's also, I think, about policy. Planning is always about policies, so material planning considerations and policies. So how do we embed at local, regional and national level policies that recognise that there is inequality in race and space. There's inequalities that need to be addressed, and there need to be key tangible targets that we can look at when we're dealing with planning applications. But it's only if those policies are embedded, as I said, as a golden thread, that they can be addressed by the actual planner, because otherwise they get buried under the millions of other policies and competing interests that you have to juggle in dealing with an application. So to get more people of colour involved, more people in the profession, and also finding ways. I know that DLUC, or MHCLG as they're now called, they have a digital planning programme doing planning differently. And one of the things that looks at is how we make decisions, how we make local plans, and community engagement. So there's a lot of money going into that. So I think we need to galvanise that and find a way of engaging our teenagers, because communities harness the space that we plan around, and that's a very important feature. So they need to be, it needs to be made accessible for those people, and we need the policies, tangible policies that we can judge applications against to go alongside that.
Amazing. Thank you so much. You summarised that perfectly. And yeah, just wanted to say thank you. We could go on and on with this conversation, really, but we'll have to come to a close. So thank you for your time. Raising up the rules.